I walked out of a job yesterday for the first time ever. Story time! So to start out, about a week and a half ago, I got hired at a grocery chain franchise. I won't say names, but they have a great twice as nice guarantee. So when I did my interview, the guy asked me if I had any questions, and I said yes, I am a disabled person, and I was wondering if you needed paperwork to prove that I need accommodations for my disabilities. The manager of the store looked at me and said, "No, I can't even legally ask you for that because it's against your HIPAA rights as a disabled person." And then he called me the next day and offered me the job. So I go in the day after that to start my first day. Immediately, there really wasn't any training. They threw me onto the curbside station because they felt it was the easiest position, which, as someone with PTSD from being hit by a car, it was a little difficult, but I managed. I honestly didn't even mention it because they didn't want to violate my HIPAA rights by knowing. So like I was saying, there was really no training. They just gave me a phone and said fulfill the orders and figure it out from there, basically. So I was doing my best and did what I could. First day was fine and dandy, nothing really happened. Second and third day, however, are where my previous videos come in with the customers and the insults and the weird things that have happened. And I started noticing a lack of communication between managers. I had one female manager in particular that came up to me and asked me to go into the coolers and freezers and stock them. One of my accommodations is that I can't go into the coolers or freezers because if I get too cold, my blood pressure drops and I will pass out. Same thing with lifting heavy things and up and down movements. So I politely explained to her that I have a disability, I am not able to do that, and that the manager said they would accommodate me. She told me that management didn't tell her this, which is kind of fair. So I brushed it off completely for a little while. So the next day I go into work and I look at my schedule. I was supposed to be scheduled for less than 30 hours a week because of my disabilities, but I noticed that I had only one day off that entire first week I started. So I immediately went to my two main managers and I discussed it with them that I only needed to be working 3 days a week, 8-hour days. They told me it was simple enough and not to worry about it. I ended up working closing shift that night with a different manager. Side note, there was a lot of managers and I don't know why. But at any rate, I was working with another manager who was a female and we were working the closing shift. I came into work and I asked her what I can do and she told me to go stock shelves with pallets of bread. I told her, that's fine, I just need to be careful because the up and down movement will make me pass out, so I just need to take a break here and there because I'm disabled and I need the accommodation. This is where things get complicated. She looked me up and down repeatedly and then she just kind of took a step back. No one told me you were disabled. Just get out of my sight and go work curbside. So I did, and it was pouring down rain. I know she did that out of spite. So I know that the manager was very frustrated working with someone that has to be accommodated. I'm really used to it, so I really didn't think much about it when she put me outside in the pouring rain doing curbside. I had an order that needed to be delivered, so I took it out to the customer's car like I was supposed to. However, it should be noted that I did not fulfill this order. I didn't know what all was going into the order. I just was following the list that I was given as to what was supposed to go to her car. So I bring out her groceries and I put them in her car for her, and she started asking me where her second gallon of milk was and where the other things were, and I just looked at her very confused. I explained to her that I didn't package her order, I just saw that she had 5 bags that needed delivered to her car, and that's all I knew. So the woman comes to the back of her car and we both start going through her bags trying to figure out what's missing. And right away there was another problem. Not only was she missing several items, but the items she did receive were all packaged horribly. Bread and eggs were at the bottom of an overfilled bag filled with cans and heavy things on top of it, smashing everything. She was missing about $25 to $30 worth of items that she had ordered. And not to mention, she's standing in the pouring rain with me as I'm trying to decipher what to do. The lady was extremely patient with me and extremely nice, and I appreciate that so much from her. So I offered to call the manager out to the parking lot, and she agreed that that's a good idea. I always kept my radio right here so that I could hear everything that they say loud and clear, and I didn't miss anything. I radioed the manager and I let her know I needed her in the parking lot out by curbside. Audibly on the radio at full volume, she huffs and says, "I guess I'll be there in a minute." The woman looked at me and she was quite concerned, honestly. So as I'm apologizing to this woman, my manager comes running out in the pouring rain, and she just looks at me with this really angry look and she's like, "What's the problem?" So I explain her the situation as politely as I can. She immediately turned to me and started reprimanding me for things that I didn't even do. You do realize you overfilled these bags, right? They're way too heavy, and not to mention you smashed the bread and the eggs for the customer. I kept explaining to her repeatedly, like at least 10 to 15 times, that I did not fulfill the order and it was not my fault that these things were damaged and or missing. But she was not letting it go. She was adamant that I needed to learn a lesson. In fact, she audibly said it in front of the customer that the only reason she's reprimanding me is because I needed to learn. I was so ashamed of the situation that the customer stepped in and told her she needed to stop. The manager was flustered and she just looked at me and said, make a list of whatever she's missing and needs replaced and just go get it. So that's exactly what I did, and I came back and the woman apologized to me about the situation. She felt so bad that I got in trouble on someone else's behalf. I went back inside and I felt really defeated. And sadly, it didn't end there. So I go back inside and I start getting my bearings together because I'm drenched from the rain and I'm really exhausted and I feel really defeated because I just got yelled at for something I didn't do, all because she really didn't like me. As soon as I came back in, she pulled me aside and tried to tell me that the only reason she was reprimanding me is because I needed to learn and that she's going to reprimand everyone in the same way. As she was talking about it, the person who actually fulfilled the order walked into the back room. She never once said anything to this person. She just looked at me and reprimanded me continuously. At this point, she was completely frustrated and just took me off curbside completely and made me stock shelves. I didn't mind it. It was an easy job, so I just did it. But I noticed anytime I tried to contact her over the radio or tried to talk to her about any issue I was having or question I had, she got visibly annoyed and really didn't give me a time of day in any way, shape, or form. Everything I asked her just seemed to, anger her more. At the end of the night, we were all cleaning the store down and wiping things down. She sent home a bunch of other employees, but she chose to keep me and one other person who was her friend and she talked to and stood there with the entire time while I cleaned. I just accepted it as, I'm the newbie and I have to do the grunt work. But then I went to work the next morning. Immediately, my big manager pulls me into his office. The manager looked at me and without hesitation he said, "So the night manager last night told me you refused to stock the shelves because of your disabilities?" I took a step back because I was not expecting this right as I walked in the door. I explained to him that no, I didn't refuse. I said I just need slight accommodations in case if I need a minute for my blood pressure to fix itself or if I need to take a step back for a second. That's all I told her. I mean, it's a pallet of bread. It's not that heavy. He then went on to tell me that my accommodations are getting a little bit out of hand, and that when I applied for the job, it says on my application that I am able to lift 40 pounds without assistance or accommodations. I looked at him dead in the face and said, "I told you from day one that I had a disability, did I not?" He said yes, but then proceeded to look at me very quickly and say that he needed paperwork from my doctors now, and that I had to get it to him immediately. I wasn't able to get it to him immediately because my next available doctor's appointment is September 1st. I explained that to him, and I also made the point of saying that you didn't want accommodation paperwork, that you said it was against my HIPAA rights. He looked really frazzled and just said, "Well, now I need it. Your issues are becoming a problem, and I need to have it documented now." At this point, I'm shaking and embarrassed because I don't know what to say. And I had been working there long enough that I should have had training, but I still hadn't done it. He was also fully unaware of the places that I had worked in the store. He said he was going to put me on curbside and then he was going to have me trained on curbside that day, to which I said I'm already trained on it. I've only been doing that since I got here. I was hired to work the cash register. When I told him I worked curbside only and hadn't been trained on anything else, he clearly looked confused. I was hired to be a cashier, so I asked him straight up, when am I going to be trained on the one position I was hired for? He just looked at me and said, "I don't know, I'll figure it out." At this point, I started noticing that the other managers were clearly talking about me a lot. Anytime I came over the radio with a question or something that needed done, they just kind of made fun of it. Like, if I asked them for a specific code for something for someone else, then they would be like, "Ugh, really? Okay, hold on." And then I would be sitting there for a while. There was a long pause. And then they would come back over the radio, mumble something, and if I couldn't hear it, I would ask them to repeat it. When they would repeat it, they would scream it over the radio, so you could hear it through the radio, and then you could hear them clear across the store screaming. Or if I asked them a question, it just seemed like they found it comical that I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Like, there was kids who were climbing on displays or riding underneath carts Superman style, and I would tell them, hey, please don't do that, you're gonna get hurt. I had one manager tell me that I'm not allowed to reprimand anyone in any way, shape, or form because of that, and it's against policy. I had another manager tell me the complete and total opposite, that I'm supposed to stop them from doing that because it's a liability to the store. And anytime I walked in the room, it got suspiciously quiet. No one wanted to work with me or wanted to help me. So most of the time, I just aimlessly walked around trying to find a manager because either I didn't have a radio because there weren't enough supplied to us, or I just simply didn't know what I was supposed to do. Several days had gone by, and I had asked every single day when I was going to be put on the register, and each manager told me, it'll be tomorrow, it'll be tomorrow, it'll be tomorrow, and tomorrow never happened. Finally, I got annoyed with it, and I went into work the one day and I said, I'm supposed to be training on register, and I haven't even touched it yet. When am I getting trained? To my surprise, they wanted me to do it that day. They had me stand behind another cashier, watch her for about half an hour, trying to learn and shadow from her, basically. Then they put me on my own register and had her stand behind me. So anytime I needed to type in a code to weigh produce or anything like that, she would immediately reach over my shoulder and do it for me, and I wasn't learning anything because she just did it for me and didn't explain anything. So after about 10 minutes of that, she looks at me and says, oh, I'm supposed to go on break now. You're gonna be the main register, you're gonna be by yourself. What? She looked me up and down, she was like, unless you need more help, I guess I could push my break back. I was over it, so I told her just to take her break and I would figure it out. So anytime I had a problem, I would go on the radio and try to contact a manager for assistance. And they got mad at me every single time and made me feel so stupid. Like they actively tried to make me feel really dumb. There was an item that wouldn't scan and I needed the code for it to type it in. So I go over the radio and I say, hey, there's this specific item and it's not scanning, and even when I type in the actual barcode, it still doesn't show up as a real item. I asked them for the code and if they could tell me what the price of it was. The only response I got from management is, the code's at your register, figure it out. The customer's standing in front of me looking at me really concerned, and I'm panicking. Everyone was beating into my head that everything that you do at that store is timed. So whether you're working the register, working curbside, whatever it is, you were under a strict time limit, and if you exceeded that time limit, you were seen as a poor employee, and it could actually negatively affect your job. If I had stayed there until my 60-day review, they could have fired me for being too slow. So I'm frantically looking around this cash register trying to find this code to type in so I can ring up this item. So out of nowhere, one of the other coworkers comes up behind me, moves a bunch of things that's on my register, and picks up this random sticky note that has the code on it for this item. She didn't hand it to me, she didn't do anything, she just slapped it on the counter next to me and said, it's right there for you. Again, I felt extremely uncomfortable because customers are staring at me, they're mad at me because I'm constantly asking questions, and it was just all around weird. Anything I said or did just revolved around either my disabilities being an issue or my working being an issue. So I started discussing it with my friends and family, how they're poking at my disabilities a lot, how they're really not trying to accommodate me, how they're just now asking for paperwork even though I offered it in the beginning. Things weren't adding up at all. I started dreading going to work every day because I was afraid that they were just going to keep attacking me for things that I can't control. Anytime my disability was mentioned, it was always in a really uncomfortable way. It was always, oh, we can't have you do that because of your disabilities type of a thing. So finally, after only having one day off during that week, I finally had my second day off to myself. I had plans for the day and I was also off the next day, and both days were occupied. At 9 a.m. that morning on my second day off, I get a phone call asking me to come in and work. I missed the call because I was asleep. About 2 hours later, I get a text message from a number I don't recognize. It was my boss asking me to come in and cover someone's shift for them because they weren't there. I was told from the beginning we were not allowed to be texting or calling our bosses outside of work. And the number he called and texted me on was not what he told me was his personal number. They were very aware that I was only supposed to be working 3 days a week, but yet he still asked me to come in anyways and not anyone else. I told him very politely, no, I'm not coming in, and he didn't answer me. So I took my 2 days off that I was supposed to have. And then I got into work yesterday. So at this point, my friends, my family, everyone's very aware that my job has been picking on me and not helping me at all with accommodations with my disabilities. ADA guidelines were out the window from day one. So we were discussing different options, and I was looking into applying for other jobs, and I was just going to be there until I found something better. I thought. I get into work yesterday, and I see that my assistant manager's working, and he was probably the most nicest and most reasonable person I had talked to the entire time I was there. So I pulled him aside, and I started telling him about my issues and what's been going on, and that I'm not really handling it well, and that I was ready to quit. He looked at me and apologized and said, and I quote, "That's above my pay grade. All I can do is just have a manager's meeting, and that's really it." Deep down, I knew that that wasn't going to be enough because I had already discussed it with every single manager, and no one wanted to help me. Not even the main manager wanted to help me at this point. So I just pushed down my emotions and kept working. He decided to accommodate me for the day and put me on register and was just going to keep me there. It didn't help that the start of my day was just a lot of bad customers, one after the other. One wanted his quarterback from his cart so badly that he was yelling at me for it. You could just ask and they would give you a quarterback. As the cashier at this store, when you check someone out, you put their stuff into the cart immediately, and the cart I was using wasn't the one he had, so he didn't get his quarterback, so I switched the carts. Everything's great, right? Like, he's getting his quarterback and I'm still working. When the manager made him aware that if he asked nicely, we would have given him a quarter, he then turned around and looked at me and said, "Give me another damn quarter." We obviously told him no because he got his original quarterback. He said some really awful things to me and then he walked out the door. Great, my mood is now completely depleted. I was trying so hard to check people out and I literally never lifted my head to look at them because I was crying to myself. Because the manager was making fun of me over the radio again, everything was just going wrong. Nothing was getting better. And then this old woman came to my register. She bought about $20-ish worth of items and handed me a $100 bill. No, Karen, I know this scam. So I checked her $100 bill, it was real, and I gave her her correct change. It was about $72 and some change. I gave her 3 20s, my last $10 bill, and then $2. She came back about 5 minutes later and told me that I gave her the incorrect change. She dropped in front of me 3 $20 bills and the coins, but the 10 was completely gone. I didn't care if I had an attitude at this point because I was over everything, and I told her that I handed her the correct change to begin with. She was screaming at me, calling me incompetent and other things like that, and demanded that I give her the correct change. So I did the right thing and I called my manager over to help me because this was obviously a scam. Audibly over the radio, my manager said, "Ugh, can this wait a few minutes? I'm busy." Not really, no.